Don't come to the airport, Dad. Her voice from last night won't stop ringing, a command that keeps tightening like a belt as the gate sign blinks blue over my head. I'm already here, cap pulled low, back against a cold metal chair, a paper cup of tea cooling to a skin at my elbow. Between my fingers, I turn the small toy airplane my granddaughter forgot on my coffee table, plastic wings catching the fluorescence, propeller clicking soft as a metronome for a life I'm supposed to sit out. I was told not to come. I came anyway. And now, every sound feels like proof that I shouldn't exist where I am. The printer spitting boarding passes, the drag of suitcases along the tile, a child squeal vaulting over the rows of seats and landing squarely in my chest. A bell chimes. A family laughs. I keep my eyes on the toy, on its scuffed nose, and the purple sticker sometime decided was a star. 2 rows ahead, a man folds a newspaper the way men do when they expect to be seen. I do not. I've folded mine into obedience, a gray shield in my lap. The headline shouts about weather and politics. I only see the way my hands look older, yes, but steady half hidden beneath the crease. If anyone glances at me, I want to be what I've been told to be. Quiet, easy, invisible. Don't come. Don't make it complicated. Don't stand in the way of the trip. I lift the cup. The tea has gone cold, bitter as swallowed truth. Last night I brewed it to stay awake after that call, left it untouched on the nightstand while her voice paced the room. Now it sits here like a witness, the lid dented where my thumb keeps pressing. I'm pressing now, pretending the pressure can keep the tremor down. The loudspeaker coughs. The gate agent smiles at the crowd. A teenage boy sleeps with his head pillowed on a backpack, mouth open to the fluorescent air. A woman in a red coat knots her scarf with a practiced tug that makes someone in me ache with envy. It must be a skill to wrap warmth around yourself on command. I try to do the same with my composure, keeping my gaze low, keeping my small plane moving round and round. I hear them before I see them, voices I know by their edges. The click of shoes I once paid for. A laugh punctured by a cough. That cough always grated on my nerves when it came from him. Today it opens the floor under me. I don't look up, not at first. I watch the toy spin. I count the clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4. I pretend I'm nobody and nothing. A man waiting for a flight that isn't mine, with a cup of tea that isn't mine, holding a child's toy that isn't mine. Passports ready? Her voice says, bright as polished silver. I look up. They are a bright picture moving through the gray. My daughter, with her hair pulled back in the low knot she wears when she wants to look dependable. Her husband with that cough. The kids wriggling like they're wrapped in sunlight. And 2 others, strangers whose presence makes the air taste metallic. The first is a woman about my age, wearing a traveling sweater with wooden buttons and the kind of necklace people buy in little beach towns. The second is a man with a camera strap across his chest, touching every bag like it belongs to him. My granddaughter's shoelace loosens. She throws out a foot, impatient. The woman in the sweater kneels without thinking and ties it 2 loops. A gentle tug like she's done it 100 times. The girl leans into her shoulder with the easy weight that belongs only to trust. "Thanks, Grandma," the child says. A small, clean word. It slides under my ribs and finds the tender places I thought had already scarred over. My fingers squeeze the toy. The propeller stops. The gate agent calls for families with small children, and I realize the family I know has expanded without me. A circle drawn tighter around a center I cannot see. I become very still. There are choices in stillness. To rise now, to speak her name, to make her turn toward me with that practiced smile that apologizes and dismisses, "No, not here, Dad," or to fold smaller, to slip between the edges of the moment until there is nothing for anyone to trip over. My heart leans forward. My body leans back. The toy plane rests in my palm like a question. The tea cools past saving. I watch my daughter hand out passports. The careful way she counts. The way her husband rests his hand on the shoulder of the man with the camera. The woman with the wooden buttons takes my grandson's backpack, testing the weight the way mothers do. She looks comfortable with them. They look comfortable with her. It is a simple tableau, and it is breaking me with its simplicity. The agent scans their papers. Beeps confirm what I already know. Their names are on a list. Mine is not. Her voice. My daughter's cuts through again. Cheerful, efficient, everything I taught her to be when I thought the lesson would circle back to me. She ushers the children forward. They hop. The boy waves his hands like airplane wings. The girl checks her shoe, satisfied, and squeezes the woman's hand. "Come on, Grandma," she says, eager, reaching for a future I won't be in. I press the newspaper into a harder shape. It crumples, gives like old fruit. The word from last night keeps pulsing. Don't come, don't come. I came, I sit, I witness. And as the line swallows them, I feel the smallest, meanest hope rise ridiculous, human, that she will turn, that she will sense me as surely as I sense her, that some old filament still runs between us and will snag in the light of this fluorescent morning, that she will tilt her head, search the room, and find me there, an old man with a toy airplane and a useless cup of tea, and remember whose hands tied her shoes when she was small. She doesn't look back. The gate beeps them through. The toy's propeller quivers and then is still. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a short text from Laura. "We'll be leaving early. Don't bother getting up." I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee cooling beside me, watching the steam fade until the surface went still. The chair across from me was pushed in too neatly. No sign of the cereal bowls or juice glasses I'd half expected to see. Through the half-open door, I could hear the muffled sounds of their hallway. Zippers, the thunk of a suitcase wheel against the wall. A child's giggle quickly shushed. Laura appeared in the doorway already in her travel sweater, the one with little flecks of blue that matched her eyes. She didn't sit. She didn't even step fully into the kitchen. Her hands were busy fastening the strap on her carry-on, and her smile was polite but distant. "We'll just grab something at the airport," she said, glancing past me toward the window as though the weather outside was more urgent than my face. I nodded, my fingers curling around the warm mug. "All right." From behind her, Mark's voice called, "Laura, the car's running." She gave a quick wave, not quite a goodbye, and disappeared down the hall. A moment later, I heard the front door open. Cold air swept in for a second before it closed again. The sound of the car backing out was muffled by the kitchen walls, but I still caught the crunch of tires on frost. I stayed at the table, listening until the silence settled back into the house. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but I lifted it anyway, holding it close to my lips without drinking. The steam was gone now, just like the warmth in the air where they'd been. And in that quiet, I felt the smallest shift, the kind you don't name out loud. Something had moved, not between us exactly, but around us, like a chair quietly taken away from the table when you weren't looking. I left my coffee cup in the sink that morning, half full, the way I'd left it the day before. No one noticed. The house felt different in their absence. Not empty exactly, but arranged for someone else's life. I wandered through it as though I were walking through a model home. Shoes lined up neatly by the door. Throw blankets folded on chairs I never sat in. The faint scent of Laura's lavender spray hanging in the air like a polite do not disturb sign. In the living room, the toy airplane still sat where I'd placed it after she'd left it behind on her last visit. Balanced on the arm of my chair, its little propeller angled toward the window. I'd meant to return it that morning, slip it into her backpack when no one was looking. But it stayed, a small thing left out of place, and maybe that's why I couldn't bring myself to move it now. The day settled into its quiet rituals. The shuffle of mail through the slot, the hum of the refrigerator, the familiar groan of the radiator in the hallway. I made a sandwich I didn't really want and ate it at the counter, standing because the table felt too large for one person. After lunch, I found myself checking my phone for messages, though I hadn't heard the vibration. Nothing from Laura, nothing from Mark. Not even one of the children's accidental voice recordings they used to send. All muffled laughter and half sentences. By late afternoon, the light shifted. That long, pale strip of winter sun crept across the kitchen floor. It brushed the leg of the chair where my granddaughter usually sat, swinging her feet while she told me about school. Today, there was only the chair, still and polite. The air around it empty. I made tea, more out of habit than desire. The kettle whistled in its familiar way, but without the layer of voices in the background, it seemed louder, almost intrusive. I poured the water into the same cup as the morning's coffee, the one I hadn't washed, and sat in the living room. The toy airplane was still there. I reached for it without thinking, turning it in my hands, feeling the tiny burr along one wing where the plastic had chipped. I spun the propeller once, twice, listening to the faint click. The sound was small but insistent, like a clock counting down to something I couldn't see. I tried to read. I tried to watch the news, but my eyes kept drifting to the window, to the street where their car should have been parked. The driveway looked larger without it, like a missing tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. When evening came, I made dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, enough for 4 without even thinking. The habit was stronger than the logic. I plated one portion and left the rest in the pot, the other plate stacked neatly on the counter, unused. I ate in silence, twirling the fork, watching the steam rise and fade just as it had from my coffee that morning. And I thought about how easy it is to vanish. Not all at once, but bit by bit, in the spaces between invitations, in the meals cooked for fewer people, in the unreturned glances across a room. When the dishes were done, I sat in my chair and picked up the airplane again. I set it spinning on the armrest until it wobbled and fell into my lap. I didn't put it back this time. I kept it there, resting against my knee as if holding it might keep me from disappearing entirely. I've been here before, this waiting, this watching, but the last time I was the center of it. The memory comes on the steam from my tea, as if heat could lift the past out of hiding. It was winter then, too, the kind that bites gently at your ears and paints a pink bloom on a child's cheeks. Laura was 8, all elbows and wool tights, the brim of her red knit hat forever slipping over one eye. We were headed to the little regional airport for the first flight she would remember, the short hop to see my sister for Christmas. I can still feel the scratch of my corduroy coat at the shoulders and the way her mittened hand swung from mine like a bell rope, tugging me forward, trusting I knew the way through everything. The terminal smelled like buttered pretzels and floor polish. A piano tune piped from somewhere, tinny, cheerful, and every sound seemed to lift her higher. She read every sign aloud, certain the words would reward her for noticing. "Departures," she said, savoring the shape of it. "That means we're leaving, right?" I nodded, proud of her certainty, proud of my own, as if I had personally arranged for planes to kneel and rise on our say-so. We bought hot cocoa in paper cups, so thin the heat pricked our palms. Hers came with a shortbread cookie that crumbled, leaving a small constellation of crumbs on her scarf. She licked one thumb, pressed it to the sugar on her glove, and grinned at me like we were keeping a sweet secret from the rest of the world. I remember thinking then that a father's job was mostly this, carrying bags, and believing in what the day might become. At the gift kiosk, the woman with holiday earrings dangled a tray of plastic trinkets for the children who still wore wonder openly. The toy airplane blue with a silver stripe and a single purple star on the tail caught Laura's eye. "That one," she whispered, touching it like a small bird. It cost more than a trinket should, but I pretended to consider and then handed it to the cashier with the shy flourish of a magician returning a chosen card. Laura pressed the plane to her chest, then launched it into the air with both hands. It nosedived into my coat, and we both laughed the loud, unrehearsed kind of laugh that empties you of everything but the present. We sat by the window at the gate, our knees touching. I read the newspaper aloud in the old way I used to read bedtime stories, skipping the bad parts, doing voices for the funny names. She bounced the little plane along the armrest runway, calling me Captain, and asking for weather reports I improvised. Skies clear with a chance of extra cookies. When the agent called families with small children, she slid off the chair and took my hand again. Not because she needed help, but because she wanted the music of moving together. On the jet bridge, a rumble rose through the metal like distant thunder. Laura pressed her ear to the wall and declared she could hear our plane breathing. "It's ready for us," she said. "Ready for us." The words sat in my chest like a candle cupped against the wind. On board, the flight attendant pinned a paper set of wings to Laura's sweater and pinned the whole sky to my memory. During takeoff, she buried her face in my sleeve, then peeked out to watch the houses shrink into toy blocks. "We're flying," she said, reverent, and when the plane leveled, she put the little blue toy on the tray table and made it match the view, tipping, banking, daring. "Look, Dad, we're doing it." A stranger across the aisle smiled at me, not at the plane, not at the child, at me as if to say, "You're the steady here." I believed him. For those hours, I was the map, the coat, the cocoa, the reason the world held together. We gave the purple star a story on that trip. "It's our mark," she decided, "so we can find our way back." At my sister's house, we stuck a matching purple star on Laura's suitcase tag, then on the dog's collar for good measure until he shook it off and we laughed ourselves silly. That winter, the purple star meant we belonged to one another. It meant if one of us got lost, the other would keep looking. I returned to the chair by my window now, the present sitting beside me like an unexpectedly cool cup. I reached for the toy airplane on the armrest, the same model, the same silver stripe, the same purple star on the tail that my granddaughter liked because it made the plane brave. It isn't the one I bought years ago. That one lives somewhere in a box of old treasures, probably under a tangle of ribbons and programs. But this toy carries the echo, the shape of our old promise. I turn it in my hands the way I used to turn the newspaper pages to the comics, for Laura, saving the best for last. Outside, the light slides across the driveway. Somewhere far beyond my window, there's a lively gait and a voice, calling families with small children. A woman about my age is tying a little girl's shoe, a purple star on, a suitcase, a tail fin, a memory glints and goes still. I can still taste cocoa if I try, the powdered sweetness, the scald along the tongue, the way Laura blew across the surface like she was coaxing a tiny wind into being. I can still feel the weight of her hand, insistent and trusting, anchoring me to the floor even as the plane charged the sky. Loved then, necessary then, central in a way that didn't require announcement or permission. I set the toy back on the armrest and straightened it as if a runway crew were guiding a nose wheel into place. My thumb finds the burr along the wing. The star shines a little in the fading light. If I blink, I see us again at the window. Laura small, her hat slipping, my arm curved around her shoulders. We were both looking at the same thing then. That's all. That's everything. And I realized it wasn't the flying that mattered. It was the way she looked for my face whenever the loudspeaker crackled. The way she took my hand not out of fear, but out of habit. The way our purple star meant home, whichever direction the plane turned. I lift the cup and sip. The tea is cooling. The toy's propeller ticks once in the quiet. Somewhere, a plane leaves the runway. Somewhere, a child announces, "We're doing it." I hold the small blue body in my palm and feel, again for a breath or two, the outline of the man I was when someone else's world steadied at my touch. They announced a small delay, 15 minutes, just enough time for the mind to misbehave. The gate agent's voice floated over us like a thin shawl. "Maintenance, thank you for your patience." People sighed, sat, unzipped bags. The crowd rearranged itself into little islands. My daughter shepherded everyone a few rows closer to where I sat. Not to me, never that, but close enough that the air between us felt newly possible. I straightened without meaning to, folded my newspaper to the travel section as if that could make me look occupied and available at the same time. The toy airplane waited under my palm on the armrest, warm from my skin. I pressed the propeller once, just once, and the quiet tick felt like a match catching. "Let's sit for a minute," my daughter said. She took the aisle seat 3 chairs down, knees turned toward the kids. The woman in the traveling sweater settled beside her. The man with the camera stayed standing, hands in his pockets, surveying bags like a shepherd counting sheep. My granddaughter's eyes made a slow, innocent loop around the room, the way children's eyes do when time loosens. They passed over the windows, the snack kiosk, the man snoring into his scarf. Then they found me. It wasn't dramatic, no widening, no gasp. Just a small pause as if she'd recognized a shape and was searching for its name. I felt my mouth shape a hello I didn't say. I lifted the corner of my newspaper in a tiny, ridiculous salute. The propeller ticked again, softer. She drew breath, half raised her hand. "Shoelace," the other woman said gently, touching her knee. It was true. The lace had wormed out of its knot. The girl bent obediently. When she straightened, the look had gone, replaced by the next small need, as looks in children always are. Still, hope is greedy. It invents reasons to stay. Perhaps Laura would get up for coffee and see me as she passed. Perhaps she'd laugh a little with relief. "Oh, Dad," and the morning would rearrange itself. We'd sit for 5 minutes, 2, 1. Enough to exchange a real glance. Enough for the air to say, "We haven't forgotten you, we only misstepped." My phone buzzed. Her name lit the screen. For an instant, light moved through me as suddenly as sunrise. "There you are," I thought. "There you are." The message contained a photo. The 4 of them in a too-bright kitchen earlier that morning. Backpacks lined like sentries. The kids holding passports. Laura's smile practiced and even. Underneath, "Headed out. We'll text when we land." The little heart she used for grocery lists and reminders. I stared until the screen dimmed. The propeller under my thumb went still. Across from me, my grandson leaned into Laura's side to say something, and she smoothed his hair in that automatic way I'd once thought belonged to me forever. Then she stood. "Coffee," I told myself. "She'll walk this way." She did. Paper cup in hand, eyes on the lid. She moved down the aisle. The distance between us felt like a stitch being drawn through cloth, coming nearer, nearer. She glanced up once, not to scan faces but to check the gate number, as if the world were a list and she was staying on it. For one heartbeat we were aligned. Her shadow grazed my shoes. The cap I'd pulled low, the newspaper's folded spine. A polite smile hovered on her mouth. The kind you give to no one in particular so you don't have to give it to someone in particular. It passed by me, attached to air. The coffee was too hot. She juggled it to her other hand and winced with a breathy laugh. The man with the camera reached to take it from her. His fingers brushed hers, an ordinary married gesture, the kind you don't notice unless you've run out of them. "Final call for pre-boards," the loudspeaker crooned. The plane at the next gate hiccuped itself down a jet bridge. A suitcase wheel clicked like a metronome. Another buzz on my phone. A group text this time. Send pics. From a cousin, balloons attached. A chorus of thumbs up bubbled in. My name wasn't in the thread. My number must have been left off when they made a new family chat. I watched the little dots pulse, then vanish, and the absence landed softly, like a feather that still manages to sting. The agent announced a gate change of course. A little ripple of motion lifted everyone. They gathered their things, a flock turning in agreement. Their new path would take them directly in front of me. I felt the fool's hope rise again, dutiful as a tide. I stood to let people pass, the old courtesy, the old muscle. As they reached my row, the other woman caught my daughter's eye. Just a glance, small and quick, but full of information. Not here, it said. Not now. Laura nodded almost imperceptibly. She angled her body so the children followed the line of her arm instead of the lay of the aisle. They moved like water around a rock. I was the rock. My granddaughter, last in line, slowed for half a step, just enough to look at the floor beside my shoes, where a purple sticker knocked loose from some child's suitcase had come to rest. A star. Her gaze flicked up as if instinct remembered me, as if memory were a string tugged through fabric. And then Laura's hand was at her back, warm and guiding. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. Not unkind, not even aware of me. Just moving her child toward the thing the day required. A small, polite apology from the man with the camera as his bag brushed my knee. He looked directly at me then, and for a second I saw something like recognition stumble across his face. Were you? Could you be? And then he looked down, adjusting the strap as if it had asked him a question only he could hear. They flowed away. The sound of their steps joined the larger sound of all the steps, and the room returned to the general blur that protects strangers from each other. The hope emptied itself without spectacle. No crashing, no public tears. Just a quiet recalibration, like a clock that had been running fast, deciding all at once to keep the right time. I sat again, guiding the little airplane back to its place on the armrest. My thumb found the burr along the wing. I pressed the propeller. Nothing. It needed more than a nudge. "Now boarding Group 1?" the agent said. The flock rose obediently, and the line of beeps began, steady and indifferent. I lifted my cup of tea, discovered the familiar thin skin had formed on top, and drank anyway. It tasted like what it was. Lukewarm, a little stale, completely survivable. The envelope was still on the counter. White, unremarkable. The kind they'd slipped under my door with a shopping list last week. But now it was empty. The paper inside already crumpled in the trash. I don't even remember opening it this morning. My hands must have done it on their own, the way they still sometimes reach for a coffee cup I no longer fill. It had been a request. No, not even a request. A note written in quick, unthinking strokes. "Could you iron the shirts before Friday? And please stay in tomorrow. A delivery's coming." No greeting, no pleas that felt meant. No thank you in advance. I had read it twice, the way a person looks at a puzzle piece that doesn't fit anywhere. For months, that kind of thing had been my whole world. These little directives tucked between the eggs in the fridge, slid under my bedroom door, called up the basement stairs. They used to sting, then they just happened. But today, something small shifted. Not an explosion, not even a protest. More like a pin quietly clicking into place inside me. I picked up the envelope again and held it to the light. The flap was torn unevenly. A corner of someone's handwriting, my own, showed faintly through from a note I'd written years ago and reused the envelope for. It was a grocery reminder to my late husband. "Don't forget milk. Love you." I'd written it in blue ink, with the same slant I have now. The word love sat there like a fossil from another time. A time when I was not just useful, but wanted. I stood there with the envelope between my fingers for a long while. Then, instead of putting it back on the counter for the next instruction, I slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. I don't know why. Or maybe I do. Because one day, this envelope will leave with me. And when it does, it won't be carrying anyone else's lists. The envelope was still in my cardigan pocket, the paper inside faintly creased from my fingers. For days, it had been nothing more than a talisman, a scrap of my old handwriting pressed against my side. That morning, I set it on the kitchen table beside my tea. Steam curled into the air, carrying the scent of bergamot. Outside, the sky was a washed gray, the kind of color that makes you feel like the day hasn't started yet. I reached for my old leather handbag, the one with the tiny tear in the lining where a bobby pin always got stuck, and placed the envelope inside, not with the shopping lists or bills, but in the zipped inner pocket. It was a Tuesday. No one expected me anywhere. That was the point. I put on my coat, buttoning it all the way up, even though the air was mild, and stepped outside. My shoes made a soft sound on the walkway, not the hurried steps of errands or the reluctant shuffle of obligation, but a steady, deliberate pace. At the corner, instead of turning left toward the bus stop for groceries, I turned right, toward the station. The ticket clerk barely looked up when I asked for a single to the coast. "Any return?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not today." The train smelled faintly of metal and coffee. I found a seat by the window and watched the landscape shift from brick and pavement to green fields brushed with early spring yellow. My reflection in the glass looked lighter, not younger, not transformed, but like someone who had quietly decided her time could belong to her again. When I reached the seaside town, the air carried salt and the sound of gulls. I walked until I found a small cafe with blue shutters and a chalkboard menu. I ordered a slice of lemon cake and a pot of tea. No one rushed me. No one asked for anything. As I ate, I slid the envelope from my pocket and set it beside my plate. The sunlight caught the faint blue ink of that single old word, love. I realized then that I wasn't waiting for someone else to see me anymore. I had decided to see myself. When I finished, I tucked the envelope away again, not as something to give, but as something to keep. When I got home, the house was still, the kind of stillness that doesn't invite you to stay, only reminds you no one noticed you've been gone. The hallway smelled faintly of their detergent. A pair of shoes stood neatly by the door, not mine. Toes pointed inward, as if in conversation. On the counter sat a new list, this time written on the back of an envelope that wasn't mine. Pick up dry cleaning. Refill birdseed. No greeting. No signature. I took the note in my hand, felt the weightless paper between my fingers, then placed it gently in the trash without reading it again. From the living room shelf, I picked up the toy airplane. Its blue paint was chipped along one wing, the little purple star still clinging stubbornly to the tail. I'd kept it there for weeks, maybe months, waiting for the right moment to return it. I turned it in my palm, feeling the tiny burr where the plastic had split. The sound of its propeller clicking once was almost too soft to hear. Then, without ceremony, I carried it to my bedroom. From the zipped pocket of my cardigan, I pulled out my own envelope, the one I'd kept for myself, the one that still held my handwriting from another life. Love you. I slipped the toy airplane inside. It fit just right, the wings pressing faint creases into the paper. I sealed the flap and set it in the middle of my suitcase. Not the big suitcase they used when they traveled together. Mine. The one with the scuff near the handle from a trip I'd taken long ago, before I started waiting for invitations that never came. I didn't write a note. I didn't announce anything. I simply folded 2 dresses, a sweater, and my walking shoes into the case. The zipper's sound felt like the period at the end of a sentence I'd been rewriting for years. On my way out, I placed the house key on the kitchen table beside the cooling cup of tea I'd poured when I first came in. No one would be home to see it yet. That didn't matter. It wasn't for them. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The latch clicked. Quiet, final. The suitcase handle fit into my hand like it belonged there, and for the first time in years, I walked away without glancing back to see if anyone was watching. The morning air carried a faint coolness, the kind that reminds you the day hasn't decided what it wants to be yet. I walked toward the station, suitcase wheels humming over the pavement, each turn of their bearings a soft confirmation. This is mine. The town was just waking. The bakery's front windows glowed, and the smell of bread drifted out, warm and forgiving. A man in a cap swept the sidewalk in patient arcs. No one asked where I was going. No one asked if I should be anywhere else. At the ticket window, I didn't ask about times or connections. I simply said, "The next train that goes far." The clerk looked up, a little startled, and then his mouth softened. "Plenty of seats," he said, handing me a ticket without comment. I found my place by the window as I always had, but this time there was no child pressed to my side, no hand swinging from mine. The glass reflected a face I'd grown used to seeing only in the background of other people's lives. It looked different now, not younger, not altered, but scented. The landscape began to roll past. Fields stitched with hedgerows, a lone dog trotting along a fence line, the sudden gleam of water where the sun broke through. The movement of the train pressed me gently back into my seat, as if urging me to let go. From the zip pocket of my bag, I took out the envelope. It was a little bent now, the paper soft from being handled. I opened it and tipped the toy airplane into my palm. Blue paint chipped, burr along the wing, the purple star on its tail. My thumb brushed over it the way you might brush a page before turning it. It had been a reminder all these weeks. Of what was lost, yes, but also of what I'd once given, what I had once been trusted to hold. For so long, I thought the only way to honor that was to wait for someone else to hand it back to me. But here, watching the countryside drift by, I understood. Some things you give yourself. I set the airplane on the narrow table by the window, aligning its nose with the horizon. The train swayed gently, making the little propeller spin. It ticked in soft, uneven rhythms. Not the metronome of waiting, but the pulse of going. I didn't know exactly where I'd get off. Maybe the coast, maybe the mountains, maybe a place whose name I'd never heard until it came over the loudspeaker. But the uncertainty no longer felt like absence. It felt like possibility. The ticket in my coat pocket was thin as a bookmark. The day was mine to write, line by line. Outside, the sun finally broke free of the morning's gray. Light poured through the glass, spilling over my hands, the table, the little blue plane with its stubborn purple star. I let it warm me without hurry. I thought of the first time I'd heard that propeller click in my palm, years ago, with a child's laughter against my sleeve. That sound would always hold a sweetness, but it no longer pulled me backward. Now it turned me forward, toward tracks that curved out of sight, toward stations I hadn't yet imagined. The train leaned into a bend, and for a moment it felt like flight. Not the rush of takeoff, but the steady, sustained lift of being exactly where you're meant to be. I rested my hand lightly over the airplane to keep it from sliding. Not to hold it still, but to guide it through the turn. When I let go, it stayed upright, pointed ahead. And so did I.